All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm your Pankaj Sarma Sir. So, today we have come live with one of the important session. As you know, we have been running these live sessions, right, to help you in your preparation of mains. And in that series, today we will be discussing one of the important topic. Basically, I have come up with a topic from GS2, and as you all have seen, the topic is going to be basic structure and the constitutional amendments, right? So, we will be dealing with this topic today, and our approach would be to have a multidimensional perspective approach, whereby we will try to link this topic with other topics from various other GS papers, and therefore it will help us understand that how having a multi-dimensional approach is going to help us interconnect with the various topics. So, let us begin our today's journey, and I hope it will be an interesting and very engaging experience for all of you, and I hope this today's live session will definitely help you in your mains preparation, and this will boost your preparation. So, let us begin. As you know, we have been running this 50 days live sessions where we will be discussing various topics. So, you can join us. And we also have been running the differentiator batch for essay courses, as you can see, and if you like, you can join these courses, where at the end of this differentiator batch we will also be having one important workshop on the theme, and we will guide you as how to expertise in writing essays. Okay. So, similarly, we have also been running ethics classes, ethics course, which I am dealing with the ethics course, and if you wish, you can also join our ethics course. And along with that, we have other courses, but before I go on to take up today's topic, I will tell you that during the course of this YouTube live session, we will also be sharing a Google form where you will find all the details. So, whatever queries you will have in the course of our discussion, I am sure you will find it very interesting, and you would feel like you want to be a part of this CSAP IAS Academy and its initiatives, right? And you may wonder that how do I become a part of this initiative, as we see that there are the sessions are made much more interesting and engaging. And to help you with that, we will be distributing one Google form. You can just go to the comment section and you will find a Google form, and whatever queries you will have regarding your mains preparation, or even if it's your preparation of your journey into APSC and UPSC, and if you think that next year you will be writing your APSC and UPSC exams, for all those kinds of queries and concerns, right, you can approach us with the help of that Google form. And that Google form I am emphasizing because we have some attractive offers to all our students who would be basically joining us, who would be basically approaching us via that Google form. So, I would request all of you to go through the discussion, and if you find that our sessions are really interesting and they are very helpful, and you actually want to be a part of the CSAP IAS Academy, whereby you can be provided more detailed guidance, then you can join many of our courses. The details of all the courses will be available to you in our Google form, and from there you can approach us. So, with that basic introductory note and guidance as how to approach us at CSAP IAS Academy, let us begin our discussion for the day, and the topic that we have taken for the day is basic structure and constitutional amendments. right? And this is like reading the basic structure and constitutional amendment is like understanding the core of India's constitutional framework, right? As you know, this is there in GS paper 2, right? And why this topic is so very important, what are the contemporary relevance of this topic, what kind of questions that have been asked in various APSC and UPSC exams, and what are the likely possibilities and what kind of questions that may be asked in the course in this year in the mains exam, right? All that we will be taking up step by step. So just be with us from the very beginning till the end. Do post your comments, queries and concerns, and do give your feedback as well, so that we can work upon them and make it a very student friendly, whereby our sessions really produce the desired result for our students, right? So the basic structure and the constitutional amendments. So well, before I go on to discuss the what is basic structure, let us briefly discuss this constitutional amendment. And the moment when we use the word amendment, right? So we are talking about amendment vis-a-vis the constitution. Now this, the moment we say amendment, this tells us one of the specific feature of the constitution also, that our constitution can be amended, right? It tells us about the very nature of the constitution. And remember, one of the basic important feature of our constitution is that it is both flexible and rigid, right? So the flexibility, the element of flexibility is very important in any constitution, because the constitution has to live by the expectations of the society. The constitution has to accommodate the changing dimensions, requirements of the society. So a constitution that is going to govern a country, in a sense, that is going to be the basic document on the basis of which the governance of the country would be run, cannot be very rigid. It has to be dynamic. And the makers of the Indian constitution, who were very visionary, they also made the constitution flexible, but they believe that this constitution should not be amended or should not be changed every now and then on every pretext. And therefore later on, the interpretation of the constitution, as we know, when we discuss about constitution, we also need to talk about the interpretation of the constitution, right? So how do we read, how do we make sense of the various provisions of the constitution? Who does that, right? As we all know that judiciary is the final interpreter of the constitution, right? तो संविधान की व्याख्या कौन करता है? न्यायालय करता है, right? So वहां से फिर हम बेसिक स्ट्रक्चर के डॉक्ट्राइन में आएंगे, right? But now what we understand is that the constitution can be amended, and this amendment can also be done in many different ways. So there are different ways through which the constitution can be amended. Like for example, one is by simple majority of the parliament, right? And we have the examples for that, right? So secondly, by special majority of parliament, where we will require twofold majority, right? That is basically majority of the total membership, and secondly again 2/3 of the members present and voting, right? So you see here the process of amending the constitution is somewhat not that easy, right? You need to have that strength in the parliament, right? So that tomorrow any provision of the constitution is not just changed just like that, so that there is adequate strength, so that provision, a kind of a stringent provision has been made. It is not just the simple majority, right? So in some specific cases, so therefore you see some of the provisions of the constitution can be easily amended, and some of the provisions of the constitution can be amended through special majority, right? And in some particular cases, again special majority versus special majority plus ratification by half of the states, because some of the amendments may again affect the functioning of the state, or in other words, in the political science language, we can say it may affect the functioning of federalism, right? And why we are emphasizing on the topic federalism, right? Again, these things will become clearer as we move on, because it has to do with the concept or the notion of basic structure, right? So therefore, in those cases, for example, powers of the president and governor, these actually have an impact or bearing upon the state as well, right? And judiciary, for example, the independence of the judiciary, that also has to do with the, you know, federalism. For example, sometimes what we have is that we may have a conflict between the center and the state, right? And who will, you know, resolve those conflicts? We know that the Supreme Court, right, which has the original jurisdiction over such conflicts between the center and the state, right? So therefore, the judiciary or the independence, right, all these would essentially have an impact on the state also, and therefore we can think of example, right, GST for example, right, goods and services tax, right? So that is one example where you required such kind of ratification by the states, because this taxing system is going to affect the state also, their revenue also, right, and how the distribution of that revenue would be, right? All those aspects are involved, right? So basically, when we say that there are different procedures for amending the constitution, right, there are some whereby the amendment of the constitution can be made in a much more easier manner, but there are some, you know, in which cases the process of amending the constitution has been made somewhat complex, right? It is not that too easy. You need to have those numbers, right? So now we come to this aspect that the amendment in the constitution can be made, but however, while making these amendments, right, while making these amendments, the basic structure of the constitution cannot be violated. So now we will come to what is basic structure, right? What is this basic structure doctrine, right? This is the foundational principle of the Indian constitution. You know, it basically says, the basic structure basically says that the foundational principles of the Indian constitution cannot be altered. But then what is this basic structure? Where did it come from? Is it there in the constitution? Has it been mentioned in the constitution? Then the answers to these questions can be found again when we read the various important constitutional amendments that have happened in our country, right? Starting from Sankari Prasad to Sajjan Singh, and then Golaknath case, and after that how the context was set for the Kesavananda Bharati case, right? For example, earlier the court took a position that the parliament could also amend the parliament could change or make an intervention and change the fundamental rights, right? Parliament had the power to make amendment also in the context of the fundamental rights, right? But in the Golaknath case, this was actually reversed. Earlier it said that amendment was not covered by the very definition of law under Article 13. But then in the Golaknath case, this equation, this understanding of the judiciary was reversed by the judiciary, right? And now the judiciary took a position that fundamental rights were sacrosanct, and that even the constitutional amendment, the amendment also fell within the framework of the law, within the very definition of the law, and therefore even through the constitutional amendment that the parliament could not violate the fundamental rights. Now it created typical problem in the governance of the country, right? We needed to come out with various socio-economic policies, that is to fulfill the directive of the directive principles, imperative of the directive principles, but then such a judicial, you know, position in the Golaknath case problematized it, right? And therefore it became all the more difficult for the parliament to implement, right, those kind of socio-economic policies whereby the welfare of the people could be promoted, right? And then therefore this judicial so therefore the basic structure doctrine, therefore it says that the foundational principles of the Indian constitution cannot be altered or destroyed. Now there is no mention about the basic structure of the Indian constitution within the constitution, right? So this is a judicial innovation. This concept is a judicial innovation. So the judiciary has come up with this terminology, right, of basic structure, right. But what is it that it tried to say? That that the basic structure acts as a safeguard against the misuse of amending power under Article 368, right. What if tomorrow misuses the power, right? And so therefore, in order to put a check on the power of the parliament, so that the parliament doesn't abuse that power, right, you have the basic structure which puts a limit, right, which restricts the functioning of the parliament, that if the parliament tries to, parliament can make amendments. So basically, after Golaknath case, we came to this judgment, Kesavananda Bharati case, which was in 1973, right. So 1973 we have Kesavananda Bharati case, right. So one of the largest constitutional bench, again the bench did not deliver a unanimous judgment, as we all know. The bench basically was divided, but nonetheless the majority judgment held that there was this basic structure. So what was the question before the judiciary, Supreme Court? The question before the Supreme Court was that, can the parliament make amendments, right, and vis-a-vis the fundamental rights also, So because earlier they said in the Golaknath case that the fundamental rights were sacrosanct, the parliament could not alter them at any cost, right, and therefore that problematized for the state, right, to implement the socialistic principles. And then the Kesavananda, in the Kesavananda Bharati case, it was held that parliament could basically make changes in any part of the constitution. Parliament through constitutional amendment could bring about changes in any part of the constitution, right. However, in doing so, right, so it puts the another caveat, and that caveat actually comes as the basic structure doctrine, but it's where it says that, however, in doing so, the parliament cannot violate the basic structure of the Indian constitution, right. So therefore it has in a sense put a limitation on the amending power of the parliament, right. So therefore, through the basic structure, the essence of the constitution, basically basic structure basically says that the core of the constitution or the essence of the constitution cannot be violated at any cost, right. It has to be preserved, no matter what kind of majority any political party may have in the parliament, right. So it feared that if such checks are not there, then tomorrow the parliament may abuse the power. There may be a brute majority in the parliament, and what if the entire constitution was changed? All the rights of the citizens were taken away, right. So therefore it tried to strike a balance, that whereas it allowed the parliament to make any changes in the constitution, but at the same time said that while making those changes in the constitution, it has to ensure that it was not violating the core or the essence of the constitution, right. So I think if you are with me till now, and if you are finding this discussion very useful, though this is just an introduction and we are yet to build upon it. So if you have traveled with me so far, and if you are really enjoying the discussion, I would request all of you to like and subscribe our channel, so that you can keep yourself updated with our developments. So just like this session, and also put your comments in the comment section, and most importantly subscribe the channel, so that you can be updated about whatever new developments that we come up with in our YouTube channel. All right, so let us move on from that. Now what are these therefore basic structure? So has the court given a list of, has the judiciary given a list of things declaring them as the basic structure? As we said, it is a concept that has evolved over a period of time. Till 1973 we did not hear about basic structure. It is only in the Golaknath case that we got to know about the basic structure of the Indian constitution, right. So therefore from there onwards, judiciary from time to time from case to case, right, has incorporated and highlighted various aspects of the constitution as the basic structure of the Indian constitution, right. So these we can talk about, right, democracy, rule of law, secularism, federalism, judicial review itself. Now you see, judicial review itself, that is the power of the judiciary to review, right, and along with that free and fair election, right to privacy, for example, right, and so on and so forth, right. So all these have been declared as the basic structure of the Indian constitution. In various cases they have come. So do we have a complete list of basic structure? We can try to have a systematic list of basic structure. However, that list we need to keep on updating, just the way we update our understanding while preparing for the mains exam. What do? We just don't try to understand the various topics, but we also update informations and facts from the current affairs, from the newspaper readings, right, and try to make our answers all the more engaging and relevant, right. So that way we may prepare a list of things to include in the list of basic structure. However, this list would be incomplete in the sense that the Supreme Court tomorrow can also declare any of the aspects as the basic structure, and then we help to incorporate that within our list. All right. So basically, what is the idea of the basic structure? That is to preserve and protect the spirit of the constitution, right. In normal circumstances it may not appear as that important, but in exceptional circumstances you will find that this basic structure doctrine actually works as a check on any of the unauthoritarian tendencies of any of the government of any time, right. So in that sense, this basic structure doctrine is an important judicial evolution through which the essence or the core of the constitution is highlighted, and the constitution and its spirit basically the spirit of the constitution, the essence of the constitution is therefore protected, right. Okay, let's move on. Okay. Well, as I said, Kesavananda Bharati case 1973, okay, and this introduced the basic structure. Now, what did it say? That Parliament had the power to amend the constitution. However, this amending power to make the amendments, including the constitutional amendment, were not absolute, right. So it then protects the essential features, right. The basic features of the Indian constitution are protected through this doctrine of basic structure, right. So therefore constitution is not mere lawyer's document, it is a vehicle of life, right. So basically then we find that what does this doctrine do? What is the role of this basic structure doctrine? We find that this basic structure doctrine basically prevents arbitrary amendments that could undermine constitutional values, right. Again, as we said, right, any government, no matter what type of majority it has, it may tomorrow promulgate any laws that may appear to be arbitrary, that may be arbitrary, right, that may be against the spirit of the constitution. So how do you protect it? How do you ensure that those laws do not become a part of our governance? Because then that will not do justice, as the broader spirit of the constitution is to do justice, right. So therefore there the basic structure doctrine will come to rescue us, come to protect us, right. So it basically then balances flexibility and rigidity. Remember, in the very beginning only I said, right. Now this vis-a-vis this doctrine of constitutional amendment and basic structure, we are also simultaneously taking this conflict between the legislature and the judiciary, right. And why I am saying this is because recent controversies or the recent debates that you all may be going through, right. Recently our Vice President Jagdeep Dhankar sir made some comments, and some other comments, some comments came from the Chief Justice of India also, right. So that is basically signaling you that this this conflict or this debate is far from being over, and this debate often emerges from time to time, comes up from time to time, and it is in this context that when we all are preparing for our mains exam, that we need to be aware what are the contemporary developments, what are the current things which are currently in news, right? We need to follow the newspapers, we need to update ourselves about the developments, and we need to keep a close track of these developments, right? So therefore it ensures basically checks and balance between parliament and judiciary, you see. So this tussle between judiciary and the legislature, the parliament, right? So how do you negotiate it, right? So this doctrine of basic structure also tries to negotiate, find a middle path in this conflict between the parliament and the judiciary, right? So therefore the question that who is sovereign, whether the parliament is supreme or the judiciary is supreme, right? So these kinds of questions often emerge in this conflict, right? And the answers to that is like as presently as recently our Chief Justice highlighted that it is the constitution which is the supreme, right? And whether parliament or judiciary, right, they were supreme in their respective domain, right, but they could not go out of their domain, and that's why sometimes you have a criticism of the judiciary, that whether the judiciary is being overactive, so it is whether it is overreach, right, or whether parliament is trying to cross all the limits and changing altogether the core or the essence of the constitution, right? So these questions are basically mediated through the basic structure doctrine. So that was an attempt to resolve that conflict of who is superior, whether it is the parliament or the judiciary. Those kind of questions were mediated through the constitutional bench in the Kesavananda Bharati case. However, though temporarily it worked out as the formula, but again even today we find that this conflict is far from being over, this tussle is being far from over, and this comes up from time to time. Now for example, again we can talk about the example of NJSC, right? We all know about this National Judicial Appointment Commission, right, an act through which 99th constitutional amendment, right, act, that the parliament tried to bring about a change with regard to the appointment of the judges, right, and to change that collegium system, right. Currently we have this collegium system, and when this was taken up by the judiciary, by the Supreme Court, what did the Supreme Court do vis-a-vis that NJSC? The Supreme Court said that it was unconstitutional, right, that the NJSC was 99th constitutional amendment was declared as unconstitutional. Why it declared unconstitutional? Because it thought that it violated judicial independence. So if the appointment process came under the control of the executive, right, so the judiciary believed that it could potentially compromise the independence of the judiciary. So therefore independence of the judiciary again forms one of the basic structures of the Indian constitution, right? And what are the greater dangers if the independence of the judiciary is compromised? That the even the federalism would be at risk, right? Because whenever there is a conflict between the center and the state, who will resolve that conflict? It is the Supreme Court which has the original jurisdiction. But if there is control over the Supreme Court, right, by the government, then that will further problematize things, right? So this way we need to think about the examples, we need to relate with the examples and try to understand. So I hope we have briefly outlined this concept of constitutional amendment and basic structure, right? So if we have done that, I think now we can slightly try and move on from here and try and link this topic from the GS2 paper with other topics from other papers and see the interconnectedness, right? Whether talking about this theme is only, we are only doing it from the, let's say, legal perspective or from the point of view of a political scientist, or these things also are linked with other topics like society, for example, economy, right? How the constitutional amendments, right, play an important role vis-a-vis the economic development of the country, right? What happens? What about the security dimension, right? Why do we bring about these constitutional amendments, right? Of course, we said that the nature is that it is dynamic, right? So therefore, with the changes in the society, right, the constitution also needs to incorporate those changes for it to remain relevant in the changing times, and that was the vision of the makers of the Indian Constitution also, isn't it? So now therefore, why, right, let's say, why do we need to interconnect, right? Let's say in linkage, let's try to find its interlinkages with GS paper 1. For example, in the GS paper 1 you have Indian society, history, culture. Let us take some of the topics. You have to study, for example, historical evolution in the post independence era, right? The history of in the post independent era, right? The modern history in that sense, contemporary history, right? So in the post independence historical development, what we find is that this constitutional development. So how do we understand the constitutional development, right? So we need to understand it by referring to some of the important events in the history, right? So therefore, this reading, therefore we are not just, we just don't need to look at it from the political scientist perspective. We equally need to become historians for us to be able to understand and grasp these themes, right? So what we have is that the partition, the communal tensions, right? So we had the partition on the lines of religion, the communal clashes, right? The refugee problem, all that events, right? We need to connect with all those events, all those dots we need to join, and the communal tension. As we know, the communal tension, the kind of communal tension that prevailed during that time, right? And of course, the other topic, for example, communalism, right? So we were grappling with the problem of communalism. We had seen communalism not just immediately during the partition, but even before that, right? We had that history, right? And how communalism created problems for all of us, right? So therefore, and also later on, when you have the communal tensions that increased in our society with various developments, for example, the mobilization, in the post 1980s and subsequently resulting in the demolition of the Babri Masjid, right? So we have that kind of a communal tension emerging in the society, right? So how do we understand this topic of communalism, right? And so how is it that an understanding of the constitutional development, constitutional amendment and the basic structure is going to help us, make better sense of these themes like communalism, or for example, the post-independence constitutional development, right? So there we will have to look at, and also similarly we have diversity as one of the important topic, for example. Now how this diversity is negotiated, right, through the constitutional provisions, right? This diversity was there from the very beginning. When we became independent, this diversity was very much there. So when the framers of the Indian Constitution, they got together in the Constituent Assembly to draft a constitution for free India, independent India, right? They had all this background, right? So they had seen the communal tensions, right? Communal clashes, right? They had seen the diversity. Now how, and this diversity is there not just in terms of the people, right? Of course, in terms of people there are diversities, but these diversities importantly were also present, among the various states, right? So how do we find a way out of that diversity? How do we ensure that this diversity does not become, our weakness, right? So and how do we use this diversity? Okay. So, so therefore, how did they negotiate this diversity, the makers of the Indian Constitution? Then you will find that in our Constitution we have federalism, right? We have federalism. Federalism basically refers to the distribution of center power between center and state, right? And what is the nature of federalism, right? What type of federalism do we have, right? Sometimes of course the word quasi federalism is used, but I am asking because as we said that the diversity is not just there among the people of the country but also among the different parts of the country. So, in order to accommodate the diversity, we came up with a terminology. Often India's federalism is also described as asymmetrical federalism. Asymmetrical federalism, right? Asymmetry basically refers to unevenness, right? So, between center and state, the way power and functions are distributed, it may not be exact replica in some other cases, right? Some of the states, just the way some people, if some people are lagging behind, we need to, in order to protect their interest, we need some special measures. That's why we have equality, not just in terms of a mechanical equality, but we also have equal protection of law. So, we not just have the equality before law, but we also have the equal protection of law in our Constitution, right? So that we could protect and promote the interest of those marginalized sections of the society, right? Through some classification, we could promulgate certain policies specially designed to cater to their interest. So, similarly here also with regard to this federalism also, we have asymmetrical federalism where we have some special provisions, right? And there it becomes all the more important for you to understand this asymmetrical nature of federalism, right? Why? How this diversity was, managed is through federalism, and within that federalism also asymmetrical federalism. That means some special provisions were made to cater to the needs of some of the states, and it is in this context when you prepare for your APSC Mains, right, it becomes all the more important because with regard to the Northeast there are some specific provisions, right, the various schedules, right. So, we have some special provisions that have been granted to us through the constitutional provision, and that we need to understand. So, therefore, you see, when you look at some of the important topics from this GS1 paper, you will find that an understanding of the constitutional amendment and basic structure and thereby the core of constitutional framework is going to help us, navigate the, dilemma that is present in this, some of these topics in much more effective manner, right. So, therefore, what we find is that Constitution reflects India's socio-historical journey, right. Constitution also captures that socio-historical journey, the kind of tensions, what kind of society it is. Of course, the Constitution had to incorporate the various provisions within itself so as to cater to those issues. If there is diversity, that diversity needs to be regulated in such a manner that it does not become our weakness in the days to come, so that it actually works as a strength and helps India progress much more effectively, right. So, that way an understanding of the theme of constitutional amendment and basic structure is going to help you navigate some of the important topics present in some other papers like GS paper 1, and therefore history, particularly the modern history, right, the communal tensions, because then that way you will be able to understand secularism, because when you read about communalism, you need to also read vis-a-vis secularism in order to put a check on secularism. We have the provision of secularism, right. Of course, now again the nature of Indian secularism and so on and so forth, I will not go into that detail because we do not have that much of time, but what we have is that this secularism therefore has been described as one of the basic structures of the Indian Constitution, one of the basic feature of the Indian Constitution, right. So, the judiciary from time to time has emphasized that this secularism is one of the core essence of our constitution, and this can never be, altered, right? This is one of the basic structure. So similarly, in order to navigate the diversity, we have federalism, and this federalism has also been declared as one of the basic structure. So that means that diversity needs to be accommodated in such a way, right, that it becomes productive, Okay, so let us move to other. So as I said, secularism as one of the basic structure feature, as it is one of the important features of our constitution, which has been described as the basic structure, right. So okay, so basically post partition, you see what we have done, equality of all religions, and this was a response to this post partition communalism. Okay, so why we incorporated the provision of secularism, this could be interpreted or understood in this fashion also, that in order to address the post partition communalism, right, the intensifying communalism, the fact that the communalism was getting intensified, right, during and post partition, right, in order to address to that problem, the concept of secularism, our constitution basically declared India as a secular, right, state, and therefore this secularism was about equality of all religion, right, and everyone was free to practice any religion, right, and this secularism is slightly different from the Western concept of secularism, but nonetheless, so therefore, and anyway we have this from article 25 to 28. So what do we have from article 25 to 28, right? Again, one of the important fundamental rights, right, right to religion, right. So therefore, through the right to religion also, so sometimes this question may come up, right, where does this basic structure come up, and how? Then you will find that the essence, whatever is being declared as the basic structure, for example, secularism, the word secular was added in our constitution later, right, initially it was not there, and therefore the question may come up that why then it was something which was not even in the preamble, which was added much later, has again been declared as the basic structure of the Indian constitution. Then the response to that you will find is that the spirit of the concept of secularism or the secular aspect, even without mentioning within the preamble, was very much present, okay, and this was there in article 25 to 28 also, okay, and in fact some others argue that in fact article 14 itself, right, when you interpret the article 14 in a much more broader manner, right, what does it say? It talks about equality, and how do you promote equality? By non discriminating anyone, right. So therefore, obviously any scope of discriminating anyone on the basis of religion is not there as long as you follow the article 14 in its true spirit. All right. So so basically, therefore what we found is that constitutional values with, so basically what we found is that the constitutional values are in sync with the social harmony, right, that the values of our constitution are in sync with social harmony. If we truly abide by the constitution's spirit, then the spirit of the constitution actually tries to promote harmony in the society, right, and we are dealing with society, right, Indian society for example, right, what are the challenges in Indian society, right. So therefore various topics from GS paper 1 can be connected to this topic, and that is what we wanted to highlight. Next we can have with GS paper 4, of course, ethics. Now does the constitution tell us about any ethics, right? Then we will find that basic structure as an ethical safeguard against arbitrary power. We can also interpret the basic structure as one of the safeguard, which is an ethical safeguard against the arbitrary state power. As I told you earlier, the parliament can also act in an arbitrary manner if whenever it has the brute majority, right? So who protects us in those circumstances is the basic structure, which in that context would appear or work as an ethical safeguard, right? So this becomes very important, and in ethics paper we talk about ethics, and one of the important sources of various ethics in bureaucracy, in governance, is the constitution, right? And what is the term that we use is that constitutional morality, right? Justice, transparency, integrity, and so on and so forth. Now all these institutions, for example, parliament, judiciary, executive, they have to align with ethical governance. The functioning of all these institutions have to be, right, based on the constitutional morality, the ethics that flows from our constitution, right? The ethical values that emerges from our constitution needs to be followed, right? So our constitution is one of the important sources, of ethics and ethical values, right? And particularly the bureaucrats, when tomorrow you all will become bureaucrat, you have to follow the constitutional, values, right? Constitutional ethics, right? For example, in some of the cases you may have your personal belief or personal biases, right? But you cannot allow those personal biases to come in your way, and you have to follow the constitutional values, right? So whenever there is a conflict between your personal belief and constitutional ethics, then the constitutional ethics must guide your action as a bureaucrat, right? Is it clear? So I hope if you are finding it interesting, just continue to be with me for some more time, but in the course of this journey, please do like, and if you have come this far, please do leave your comment. Your comments are very important for us, because that will help us revise, that will help us modify and design our next sessions as per your specific requirement. The objective is to help you, is to guide you, score better marks in the mains, so that your rank is secured in the final selection, right? So please do like and do put your comment in the comment section, so that we can accordingly work upon your comments, right? So anything that you want to ask, anything that you want to share, if you like, if you do not like, anything that you feel like, just put your comments in the comment section. Your comments are really, really important for us, as they will help us grow and evolve, So moving on. Now, judicial review, for example, ensures ethical exercise of power, right, as we have discussed. Now, constitutional morality versus rule of law, right? Now, constitutional morality is much more wider, right? So this guides the ethical governance, right? So it's not just the legal compliance where you just follow the law, right? Constitutional morality is much more wider, right? So the basic structure basically protects values like justice and liberty, right? Justice and liberty. And in ethics, for example, right, whenever you face any dilemma, right, which course of action that you should adopt, you should take, right? What are the guiding principles that should determine your course of action? There have to be justice, sometimes liberty, sometimes, so all these values, ethical values play very, very important role. Now, so therefore you have, Puttaswamy case, as we said, where fundamental right, privacy was declared as one of the important fundamental right, right? As we said, with the course of time, right, new things also keep on adding. Okay, and with the essay paper, for example, you may have a thought process like, this is all fine, sir, we have got to know about all these things, GS paper 1 and so on and so forth, right? And we will be able to find the interlinkages also, but what do we do with the essay paper, right? That we are weak about on that essay paper, right? And how do we work on that? Now again, you see, you cannot see things in isolation. Your essay paper doesn't, operate in isolation. You will have all these things. For example, when you will read about the constitutional amendment, basic structure, this understanding will always help you, develop your conceptual clarity, and help you analyze the amendments. Therefore, basic structure judgment in the case Kesavananda Bharati case, NJSC, for example, recently electoral bonds judgment, electoral bonds case, right? By the way, we have a very interesting article on electoral bonds. So what you can do is that you go to Google and just type electoral bonds CSAP IAS Academy electoral bonds, and you will come across a very interesting article on electoral bonds which I have written, and please go through that article, and in the course of the time also give us comment there also, right? So so therefore, when we have this kind of debates and understanding about the constitutional development amendment and the basic structure doctrine, you know, what they will help us is that they will help us in writing balanced high quality essays, right? So this information, this understanding can always be used in writing essays, right? So don't think that essays are in isolation. So all this knowledge that you will be gaining in the process can be productively and very effectively used in writing high quality essays, right? So I think we don't have much time, so let us go and understand the link between linkages with the, you know, paper 3 where economic development, let's say this is the topic, or even land reform, for example, we can understand, right? So land reform, right? What happens is that sometimes various other, you know, laws were put behind, you know, 9th schedule, and there was an apparently misuse of the 9th schedule, but in the again IR Coelho case in 2007 it was declared that even those laws, you know, which were put behind the 9th schedule to, you know, prevent a scrutiny of the Supreme Court, they are also subject to judicial review, right? These laws are also subject to judicial review, right? But what is important is that, see, as I told you, that why do we come up with constitutional amendments? Because you see, it's not just socio-political, right? It's not just socio-political, but even for economic needs, for example, economic considerations. And similarly, we will have, let's say, security concerns, right? We will also, so there may be some security concerns for which again you need to come up with constitutional amendments. For example, various surveillance mechanisms, right? Various surveillance mechanism, and when these surveillance mechanisms are brought in order to you know, streamline or address the security concerns, it may create another set of problem vis-a-vis your right, for example, your right to privacy, right? So how do we understand the interlinkages? Now both these are important for us. Right to privacy is also important, which is again one of the fundamental right, and this security, you know, it is equally important to address the security concerns, right? So you may have therefore, you know, various acts, National Security Act, right? UAPA, right? UAPA, right? So how do we understand all of this, right? Now this UAPA, again there are a lot of criticisms in the recent times. You have, you know, where, you know, when one is, you know, one has to undergo the trial and one has to prove himself, so the equations are reversed, right? So, and it's the process, and sometimes it is said that the process itself becomes a punishment. So all the debate, the contemporary debate that is taking place. So when you glance through the newspaper, right? So every day you will find that there is one or the other news from the judiciary, right? So that means that is from the constitution, because when you are talking about judiciary, we said earlier that who is the interpreter of the constitution? It is the judiciary, right? And that's why the importance of judiciary in our time, in today's time. So that's why we need to follow all these things. What is it that the court is taking position vis-a-vis these issues, right? So basically I have quickly tried to show up that post 1991, for example, we needed this socio-economic justice in order to promote, accelerate our economic growth. Post that crisis that we had, right? We opened up our, this called liberalization, privatization, globalization, LPG model, as you all know. So with that LPG model, right, we needed to bring about many changes, right? So to live up to that expectation, to live up to that pace, and therefore many reforms were initiated. So what does the court do? Of course, this economic development is also very important, right? So court will then therefore try to find a balanced path, right? Just the way we try to find balanced path. For example, earlier I was saying that we ethics paper also, right? Whenever there are conflicts between two set of duties, we need to see what is the nature of that conflict, what are the things that are at conflict, and how do we take a reasoned, reasoned decision, right, not getting carried away impulsively. So here also that role is played by the judiciary, right. So the judiciary analyzes that, and based on that analysis gives a judgment, and the judiciary has opened, allowed, various constitutional amendments through which our economic growth or the economic development was accelerated, right. Similarly, land reform, for example, right, and how removing that right to property from the category of the fundamental right was allowed, because if it was not done, it would have been very difficult to implement, to come up with certain policies through which economic development or even the socio-economic policies that the state wanted to implement, work upon as per the mandate of the directive principles would not have been possible, right. So that's why okay, I think the security dimension, I have already discussed this, security challenges, right. So let us quickly try to sum up, and we have, right, various cases that we have. EWS reservation, what has happened, these are very recent, so they are for Janahit Abhiyan versus Union of India, where the questions, certain constitutional questions were there, right. For example, that equality, that CAPE, right, one is that of course issues of equality, right, the issues of equality was involved, the cap of 50% cap was involved, right, and then exclusion of SC, ST, OBC, right, from that list, right, whether this was legal, whether this was constitutional, these were the questions, and the Supreme Court basically regarded EWS reservation, as the constitutional one. So therefore it said that the 50% cap was not sacrosanct, right, it could be crossed, and therefore it allowed, though in this case also the verdict was also not unanimous, right, the verdict was divided, 3-2, right, this was the divided verdict. So therefore though it was accepted, the debate is still there, right. So basically it is said that it expanded the social justice to the economic. So can economy alone be the criteria, right? So this was also another important question. Can economy alone be the criteria? But there the court said that yes, economy could be one of the important classification, right? And therefore it was allowed. But it also raises concerns about equity, right? Now similarly we have simultaneous election, for example, right? We have the debate that is going on, right, the call for one nation, one election, and the euphoria around it. So you as student who is preparing for the mains, what do you do, right? So there are debates, but you have to proceed by trying to understand this discourse in such a way that it will help you in your mains exam, right. So therefore various amendments would be required, right. So I will not go into the detail because of the paucity of time, we do not have much time left. So let me try to quickly wrap it up. So centralization, again risk centralization, there can be over centralization. Again the spirit of the constitution is that there should be decentralization, right, federalism, distribution of power, all those things could be affected, dilution of state autonomy, right, and the voters engagement also could be compromised, right. So therefore federalism and democratic processes. So how do we negotiate, how do we find out a way out while talking about one nation, one election? We just don't get carried away, but understand the complications which are involved, including the constitutional amendments that may be required for us to implement this one nation, one election, right. So that kind of an understanding you need to bring about, right. So we cannot compromise, federalism again at the cost of one nation, one election, because federalism is again equally important for all of us, because it is one of the important, basic features of the Indian constitution, right. So therefore why interlinkages matter? Now this constitutional amendments basically reflect socio-political and economic and security concerns. For example, you can add security concerns, security needs, and so on and so forth. And basic structure basically balances, reform versus rights. As we see, we said that how economic reforms, needed to be pursued, but while pursuing the economic reforms, it was equally important to ensure that we did not compromise with our rights, because fundamental right is again one of the important basic structure of the Indian Constitution, and that was the question, right? In the Golaknath case, remember in the beginning we began with all those discussions of Golaknath case, where they said that the fundamental right is sacrosanct and the Parliament's power to amend the Constitution stopped at the gate of the fundamental rights. But later on, of course, Kesavananda Bharati case revised it, right? So therefore, this will all help us understand electoral bonds, UAPA in their perspectives, right? So UAPA you just don't see in terms of a law, but you also relate it with the security concerns, right? So that your understanding or your approach is not one dimensional, because in the examinations you have to be very neutral, and you need to be able to analyze that particular concern theme that is given to you. You should be able to analyze from different perspectives, right? And when you bring out those different multi-dimensional approach in your answer, and when you show the examiner that its implications in various segments of the society, now that answer will really be very attractive answer for the examiner. And once the examiner loves your answers, of course the chances of you scoring really better marks is very good, right? So I hope that's why I said this holistic understanding basically enhances your exam preparation, right? So okay, so there are some important previous year questions that we can talk about. Parliaments, so these are all related to amendment of the Constitution, and in some of the cases you have National Commission, what was the recommendation of the National Commission, all those questions basically were asked, right? So for example, all right, so therefore basic structure and the amendment of the Constitution, what are the provisions, what are the ways in which the Constitution can be amended, all these questions are there. So when you look at the previous year question papers, both in UPSC and APSC Mains, the question from this particular topic has been coming repeatedly, right? So therefore there are chances, there is scope that you may get question this year also in your mains exam, and that's why you need to prepare and you need to take this topic very seriously, right? Now you may have, for example, various questions, right, with regard to that may be asked. So if I can provide you, for example, it may ask you that the push for one nation, one election may require substantial constitutional amendments, right? They may give you such kind of statement, and they may add that evaluate the implications of such reforms on federalism and basic structure of the Indian Constitution, right? So you need to evaluate it vis-a-vis federalism and basic structure, right? Whether it will temper with federalism, which is again the basic structure. So, or how do we basically implement that one nation, one election? Because we clearly know that many constitutional amendments would be required for us to be effectively be able to effect that one nation, one election. So these kind of questions and the debates, contemporary debates that are taking place in the newspaper, and in the various magazines that you may be following, just go through that, be updated, and most importantly, do read our blog, do read the blogs of CSAP IAS Academy, because we have been constantly writing blogs on important topics from your various GS paper. As I told you, one of the important example is you just type electoral bonds CSAP IAS Academy and you will be guided to one of the brilliant article written on the theme, which will help you give various important facts in a much more structured format, right? So just do all of that, do visit the website, the blog, and most importantly follow and subscribe this YouTube channel of CSAP IAS Academy, which will give you appropriate guidance from time to time, which will come out with revised discussions from time to time, depending or based upon your feedbacks, your comments, and what are the topics that you want us to take in the next live sessions, right? So just do feel free to drop your comments and share with us whatever are your inhibitions or whatever problems that you are facing in your journey of preparing for the mains, and believe us, we will be coming out with solutions. You know, we know that tomorrow you will be coming out with solution for our country, right? So until then, to help you in your journey, to help you find solution to your problems, we at CSAP IAS Academy are dedicated, you know, bunch of faculties that we have. We all bring diverse experience and exposure with all of us. Like for example, I have taught at Delhi University for the last 10 years. So with all that experience of teaching at Delhi University for 10 years, having mentored and guided my students to clear various UPSC and other competitive exams, right? So I have come here with an objective to give back to my society, right? And you all are very important to us, right? So whatever the problems, whatever the issues that you face in your journey, please feel free to write to us, reach out to us, and believe me, we will find ways. We will do everything possible for, you know, in order to help you, because we understand that if we extend this help today to all of you, tomorrow definitely will bring about a change in our society, and that is the objective with which we are functioning at CSAP IAS Academy, right? So I think this one I have discussed. So what are the key takeaways, right? It protects the basic structure basically protects constitution and core identity, the essence of the constitution, links legal, ethical, historical, economic dimensions, right? So the discussion on constitutional amendment and basic structure helped us, you know, all through. What we did is that we tried to link this legal, you know, ethical, historical and economic dimensions, right? And essential for nuanced answer, we have also understood the importance of these topics and understanding and analyzing this topic from a multidimensional perspective, because this helps us write very nuanced answer for APSC and UPSC exams, right? And therefore constitution is a living document, but its soul is eternal, right? It is a dynamic constitution is, right? So as we said, various topics you need to approach, right? And use examples, you know, all these examples, and connect it with current affairs. For example, electoral bond, right? Type electoral bond and CSAP IAS Academy, and you will get very good article on the theme, right? And most importantly, this understanding will also enhance your answer quality across GS paper, which is again plays a very important and determining role, right? So therefore, finally we can say that it is the constitutional amendment and basic structure, and from the discussion of basic structure, what we understood is that the basic structure basically acts as a constitutional firewall for democracy and justice, right? So and it basically is very important for aspirants to prepare such themes from multidimensional perspective, so that they can best effectively handle questions from across the GS papers, right? So so therefore understanding basic structure is understanding India's constitutional soul, and therefore you need to, because tomorrow we are going to determine and guide the future course of India as the bureaucrats, as the most ethical bureaucrat, because tomorrow you will be guiding the country's journey, and that's why for you it would be very important to understand, right, that what is the soul of the constitution, because so that you will also understand the importance of the ethical values that flows, all the ethical values that may flow from the constitution, and why this is so very important, as the Chief Justice of India very recently said that the constitution is supreme, right? So in all your functioning as a bureaucrat, of course you will have to abide by the framework of the constitution, and that's why it is all the more important to understand this discourse on constitutional amendment and basic structure. So with that note, I thank you all of you. I would like to thank all of you for joining and continuing with me in this journey. I hope you all have enjoyed this discussion, and based on your feedbacks and comments, trust me, we will come out with much more engaging themes and discussions in the due course of time. So till then, you just be with us by liking and subscribing our channel, and in the course of your preparation journey, I wish you all the best, and I hope to see you all as the future administrators who are not just going to be the administrators, but who are also going to use the power that your selection would give, and you will use the power. I believe that you will use that power much more ethically to bring about a transformation in the society and taking care, and in order to promote the interest of the poor and the marginalized sections of the society. With that good wishes, we wind up today's session, and we hope to see you in the subsequent live sessions that we will be conducting here at CSAP IAS Academy. So thank you for joining with me, and all the best to all of you. Thank you.